Hi everyone and welcome to C Programming Tutorial number 3 by Murex, the coder. Um Before we even begin, I just wanna make this few announcement that we are no longer using, or I'm no longer gonna be using JDoodle for our tutorials. So I'm gonna shift to a text editor called Vim. You can either use the same text editor that I'm using, or you use any IDE of your choice, but I highly recommend that you use an IDE of your choice. Reason being that Vim may be not comfortable for you, especially if you're a beginner. I know people that are so intimidated and terrified by Vim, though they are good coders, but they just terrified by Vim. Because of the way it is, as you will see, I am just an addict of Vim. I love the way it makes me learn and write programs, right? So yeah, that's just one of the announcement that I wanted to just make. So I'm gonna use the G++ compiler to compile this program. um yeah, the C program that I'm gonna write, or the examples that I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna use the G++ compiler. But yeah, enough with that. Let's head over to our lesson and discuss what we'll be discussing. Right, in this tutorial we're gonna cover loops. We're gonna have a for loop, then we're gonna have a while loop, right? And then we'll do some exercise. But something that I want to add, or something that I want to properly discuss, is a string. So I mentioned that in the previous tutorials that we will talk about strings at a later stage, and I think we are at the level where we can properly do a discussion on strings. So what I'm gonna do is I am gonna just have a slide where we talk about this string for now, and then I'll introduce the concept. Like, that you, when you define a data type, you must know the format specifier for that data type, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna be using something we know, a data type that we know, to create this data type, right? So it's using what we already know to create this data type. And this one is going to also introduce a concept that we will discuss in future tutorials when we discuss data structures. So let's just check the syntax, or how you can create a string in C. So this is the syntax, right? So this is going to be of data type char, which brings us to a definition of a string. I don't know if I mentioned this definition before, but just to recap, or just to define it if I'm mentioning it for the very first time, is that a string is a sequence of characters, right? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a sequence of char type. This is a characters char, right? I'm just gonna call it name, and then you will see a square opening bracket and a square closing bracket. That is to specify that this is a sequence. So with the sequence, it can have as many elements as possible. So these elements are regarded to as characters when we are when we are talking about a string. That makes sense. And then we have an assignment operator, and then we have a string value. But then that string value is encoded with double quotes. You remember with the char, when you declare a char, and that character is enclosed with a single quote. This one is enclosed with double quotes, right? Let's quickly discuss the specifier for the string. So string format specifier is a percentage sign, then S for string, right? T, oh no, not T, it's D for digit, or I for integer. It's one and the same thing, right? So you do remember those. So on top of the ones we have learned previously, we are gonna add the new format specifier for a string. Cool. So let's head over to our terminal and we gonna start. So this is Vim, right? Previously we just go to YDUL and the coding environment is already set for us. Apart from us setting up the coding in terms of all the necessary keywords in defining the main method or that. Um, the first thing that you want to do is to create a C file, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a directory. So I love Vim for one of other reasons is that it makes you get flexible when it comes to terminal, because when I started Vim, I had to learn terminal. For instance, I learned okay how to create a directory. I mean, in normal cases or in most cases, if you're on Windows, you just go to File Explorer, then you create a directory, manually create it directly. Right click, create new directory, and then you create a new directory, and then you create files there. In this case, I'm just gonna do all of that from my terminal without having to go right click all that. Nope, all I need is just my keyboard. Cool. So it's mkdir, and you get to also know command lines for doing this. So the instance, this is mkdir stands for make directory, and then I just want to make C programming tutorial number 3, right? Sorry, it's number 3, right? But then if I do it like this, it's gonna create multiple directories, right? But I want a directory with these names, right, and spaces, right? So the way you do this, you're gonna use a slash. So we have this, and then we have this. This is gonna enclose everything, right? That's my directory. And then if I say cd, this is change directory, and then it's C programming, and then I get to that directory, right? If I press ls or if I type ls, this is just gonna list all the files within this directory. If you see, I don't have any file inside my directory, right? So I am gonna create. So if you learned terminal, you could just use touch whatever file you have .c, and that's your C file, and then it creates a file, and you can start opening the file. But what I'm going to do is with my Vim, let me just clear the terminal. With my Vim, what I'm going to do is I am going to open the file using Vim, right? So it's Vim, but then this file doesn't exist, but we're going to get to it, right? So since this is loops and strings and all that, okay, let's just create one for string .c, and then we'll create another one for loops as well. So this is a string and then .c, right? This is the extension for C, right? It's C. Cool. I open that and then I come to my Vim, right? Here at the bottom you see that this is string, that's my file name, and then it is new, so it's a new file. So if it's a new file, after you're done adding whatever that you're adding to this file, you have to write this in memory. That's you saving this file so that it exists in memory, right? You will see I have another tab here, right? So this tab is going to be used for compiling my program. I just have to move to the correct directory, which is that, and then if you see, we have nothing at the moment, right? Though I've opened the file, but it's not yet written in memory, right? Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press I. So this is you change. So you have to change the mode. So you want to enter into edit mode so that you can start coding. So that's I. And then from there is include. You do know this. Okay, I'm going to fully explain the whole of these concepts when we get to that part. For now, we don't want to make it more complicated, but just work on the inside, and we'll get to how we get to set up our coding environment, right? Cool. So this is what we have. One thing that I also want to explain is that you remember when we discussed data types, right? we discussed int as a data type, right? So when we get to the discussion of functions, we'll declare a function of those data types that we discussed. Then we have to return a value of that data type. That's why I return 0. So when you return 0, that means that your code compiled successfully. If not, it is 1. You will see also when we get to compare strings, if they are equal, it's 0. The value that gets to be returned is 0. If they are not equal, then it's not going to be 0 that is returned, but we'll get to that at a later stage. So in this case, what we're doing is discussing string data type, right? So we are discussing a string data type. Cool. So the syntax is you declare a data type versus char, which is a char, right? And then the name of that string. So let's just call it name, and then open square bracket and close square bracket, right? Assignment operator, and then I can just say that Java is simple. Okay, I don't know why I chose Java instead of C++, but yeah, let's just go with that, and then a colon, right? Cool. Now let's display the string. Display the string. So it's printf, and then why am I putting a string? Oh yeah, I have to put that, I forgot. Cool. And then it's a percentage, and then it's s, right? And then we just want to end line, then we want to provide our name, right, which is of a string type. And that's how you declare a string and print it out. You remember how to get the user input, right? And then instead of using a percentage sign, you use an end sign, or I don't really know what the sign is, but it's mostly used for end. But not in this coding. In this coding, I think it's double end, but we'll get to that when you get to logical operators very soon. So yeah, that's your string. And now you see you're on the edit mode, right? And then you see it says insert. So insert whatever that you want to insert in this file. Once you're done, you press escape. You are no longer in that edit mode anymore, and then you hold shift and then it's a colon, right? And then what you want to use is w for write, and then if I do that, it writes. So this is the name of my file. It is new, and then it is written, and you will see that it's 159 bytes of memory, right? And then if I go to where I'm going to compile and type ls again, now my file exists in my local machine. You will know that we have two different types of memories. We have the main memory and secondary memory. This is the secondary memory, and the main the main memory is it's RAM. So basically, this file, before it was written to the local machine, it was occupying the RAM memory. It was existing in RAM, but not on your local machine. So the moment I wrote the program, it was written to the secondary memory. That's where it started existing. I believe that might be some of the concepts you guys have learned when you are learning these language, because obviously you're not just using my video to learn. This is just more of an aid to help you understand most of the concepts, right? So you can just use this in a way of guiding you in terms of the concepts, because sometimes reading a textbook is not that easy, or you read maybe one of the online resources. I recommended David Rees course. For some it might be hard to fully understand, especially if you are new to coding. So when you get to see someone doing it, it makes it easy. Cool. And then I come here, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to compile. So it's g++, the name of my file, and then the output. Or you can just choose to leave it that way, or do an output flag where you name your variable. I'm just going to name my output Murex, right? And then I execute. If I type ls, you will see that this is an executable file. And according to my color scheme, right, if you see something that is green, it is executable. If it's not, for instance, I could just say change mode -x for executable, and then I do this, right? If I type this, you will see that this is no longer executable, right? So if for instance, when we come to the next part where we're going to do when we execute the file, if your file is not executing, just use this command, change the mode, and then you add the executable rights. Oh, I'm still subtracting or removing the executable rights. So add, and then if I do ls, it's that. And then if you're wondering how I was just doing all those commands, I'm just using an up arrow to walk through the history of the commands that I've given, right? So that there is I'm just gonna clear this, and then it's a dot slash, and then the name of that, I'm just gonna type the first character, then tab, and then it's gonna autocomplete for me. And there we go. Java is simple. That is my string. So you get to understand why it's advantage, or it's more of a benefit for you to really use Vim, or not really use Vim. You can just learn terminal, get used to terminal. Then if you want, you can choose. I mean, it's not just Vim that is there. You can also use Nano. It's more complicated as well. Okay, a little bit more complicated, because the thing is, in life you have a choice. You either want to learn things the easy way or the hard way. If you learn the hard way, it gets to be beneficial to you, because you will be able to understand even more complicated stuff than people who are learning it in the easy way, because they want to keep it they want to keep it simple, and that means that they get to lead an average life. Don't play safe when it comes to learning. If you want to learn. I've also read this book, they call it what, learning Python the hard way. The title itself just kind of like called me, because when it comes to learning, I always love to learn the hard stuff, because your ability to learn hard or complicated or challenging stuff provides an opportunity for you to grow. But yeah, enough with we discussed the string, and I hope you guys now understand the string, and you've added that in the list of all the data types that you know. For now, let's go back to our slides. We'll discuss that, and then we're gonna discuss loops. So this is the beginning of loops discussion, and we're gonna start right, a for loop. So the first question you get to ask yourself is, what is a for loop, right? What is a for loop? So a for loop is a control flow statement that allows code to be executed a certain number of times. That's a for loop, right? And then you're gonna start with this is the syntax, right? So the syntax goes like this. So the syntax is that you're gonna have a for keyword, and then you have a statement one. What is statement one is something that you get to ask yourself even further. So statement one is where you're gonna declare a variable that is of the scope of this for loop block. Okay, that might not be proper English for someone, might be speaking Chinese or some other language, but what I'm doing here is I am saying you're going to declare a variable the same way you've been doing the declaration of a variable and initialize it, right? Because this variable is the variable that you want to use to determine, or as part of the condition that determines how many times you want this loop to run, right? That's statement one. And then this variable is only accessible within this for loop. Outside this for loop, you won't be able to access this variable, and I will show you when we get to the coding side. And then we go to the second statement. So in the second statement, what we have is that we have a condition for this loop. So this condition determines how many times this loop iterates, right? Which makes use of the variable you created in the first statement. Now the third statement, it forms part that affects your statement 2, because now you have a variable that you initialized and you specified when that variable gets to be this gets to have this value, and then your loop should be ending, right? So the third statement is going to be changing that variable you declared in statement 1. I believe that that makes sense, right? And then you're going to have your statements inside your function, and then you're going to close. And ladies and gentlemen, that is a for loop. Let's see this in action, right? So let's go back to our pilot. Cool. So exit, we're just gonna quit. We don't wanna edit anything, so we're just gonna quit. So it's shift colon and then Q for quit, and then you quit, and then vim, I wanna create loops.c, right? That's what we're discussing. And then it's I, and then we're gonna set up our environment to standard input output int main and return 0. And there we go, we have ourselves our setup properly set, right? And then what we want to do now is discuss the for loop. Cool. So the syntax goes like this. Are you guys ready? I'm going to take this as small or as slow as possible. So you start with the keyword for, right? Then you come to parentheses. That is fine, right? And then recalling that picture we had from our slides, we have 3 statements. Statement 1, statement 2, and statement 3. I said statement 1 is where you initialize a variable. So this is going to be of what type? In most cases, this is going to be an integer, because your for loop iterates a certain number of times. When it comes to counting, you're talking about integer values, right? Cool. So it's int, and then we're just gonna call this I equals to, maybe say we want to count from 1 to 100, or let's just say we want to count from 50 to 100, right? They will initialize it to 50. So statement 2, this is the condition. What is our application? We want to count from 50 to 100. So we have I, we want this to be less or equals to 100. That's our condition. As long as I is not less or equals to 100, then the loop is gonna break, it's not gonna execute. And then we have statement 3. Statement 3 affects our condition. So how do we change that value so that it counts I 1 2 3 until what? Until 100. We increment our I don't remember if we discussed this operator, but if we didn't, this is same as saying I plus 1, so you're just adding 1 all the time, right? Then we define our block, right? So our I exists there, but out there that I is not existing. That's what I was saying when I say that I is the scope of the for loop block. Cool. So in this case, we just gonna print percentage d, and then we just want to end line, of course. Then we're gonna print our I, and that's it. Escape w, right? We've written our file, and if I come here and I type ls, we have a new file, loops, right? Cool. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the G++ compiler, then it's loops minus o, let's just call this loops, right? Cool. Then what I want to do is, instead of just so a terminal it's a program written by someone else as well. So you are coding or you are running your program on a program or using a certain program, right? So I will show you. So far we've discussed we haven't discussed logical operators. We'll discuss that later on. But what I want to do is I want to execute, right? Instead of coming to this step where I do this after compiling, I want to do that in the same step. So I'm going to use end, and then I'm going to call the function that I'm doing, which is this one. So at first you don't start with this, but then once you know what you want, you can just do that. And I am missing something, so it's dot that. So this is a command on its own. It runs after it's compiled. So this is going to compile and create. So if it's, for instance, from our previous version, right, this created an executable file. If I take this file and go to a different operating system and run it, it will run because the code was properly converted to a machine language or computer language, should I say, which is composed of binary numbers, which is just ones and zeros. Those ones and zeros you just see, they are encrypted with information. So decrypting that information brings you to the program you just run. Now decrypting, I guess. Yeah, I thought I was misusing the word or pronouncing the word, but no, I didn't. Cool. So if I run this, we have an error. We made a mistake there. So this is supposed to be the output, right? That's the flag, and I used P, which was wrong. And as I've mentioned before, don't be afraid to have errors. It makes it easy for you to fully understand. It provides you with the power to not fear failing in a way. Don't fear to fail. Don't fear to make mistakes, because mistakes only makes you better, right? Cool. So our loop was designed to count from 50 and end at 100, and it does exactly that. And ladies and gentlemen, that is a for loop. So this is counting. So what happens is that this statement runs only once. Then this statement is going to run each and every time because it has to check the condition, if the condition is still met or not. And then you increment each and every time, right? You increment each and every time, which makes it easy for this value to keep on changing until it meets this condition. And that's the for loop. Let's head over to our slides so that we can discuss a while loop, right? Cool. Welcome to a while loop again. The first thing that you will want to do is you will want to ask yourself as to what is a while loop. So a while loop is a control flow statement that allows code to be executed repeatedly based on a given Boolean condition. So we have a Boolean condition that determines, okay, if you want to count from maybe 200 to 250 or 300, you have a Boolean condition that says that my condition is that as long as this variable of integer type is either less or equals to 250 or 300, if it's not that, then my loop is not gonna run. Let's check the syntax. So you start with the keyword while, right? And then you have those open parentheses, and then you have the condition. That condition is that Boolean condition we are talking about up there, right? And then you have statements, right? And then after having statements, you're gonna have an opening bracket, right? Then you're done with describing a while loop, right? Let's actually see this in action, and I'll also discuss the other variant of that loop just now. So we're done with that. Cool. Let's go to while loop. Cool. So we start with the keyword while, and then we have parentheses, and then we have a condition, right? But then we don't have a variable because our I only exists in that while loop, in that for loop. So let's create different variables. Say z is equals to, so one account from 100 or 200. Okay, let's just call it 100. And then okay, let's just call it 200 so that we know that, okay, 500 basically, so that we don't get to confuse ourselves with the other one. And also let's just have a bit of space there, so it's end line, end line, end line. We're just gonna add 3 lines, and the right. So this is while, and then we say z is less or equals to, so one account maybe to 600, right? And then we open our parentheses, and then we have our statements. What do we want to do? We just want to print that value, right? So we're just going to use print f. So since this is of integer type is d, and then we also want to end line, right? And then it's z. Cool. But now if we run this loop as it is, our z is not changing. So we're going to create something which is known as an infinite loop. That is something we don't want to do, because you don't want a program that just runs without ending. You want your program to end. So you need to have a condition for that, which is incrementing, right? So we have to increment or change this value. So this is going to be z increment, and that's it. Now you have a finite loop. Your z is going to increase, and then when it reaches a value that is higher than 600, it stops. Escape, shift, colon, w, and you write a new program, right, which is 238 bytes. And one thing that one person might want to do is like, okay, cool, so what if I do this, right? So if it's ls, right, we have loops, right? That's our executable file for this program. This is just the previous program, right? So if I do this, right, and I say loops, what's gonna happen? Am I gonna get the new updated information, or am I gonna get the previous information? Remember, we just edited the our C file, right, for loops. Did we change anything, or we didn't change anything? If I run this, that's just that. This is still counting from 50 to 100. Why is that? We didn't compile our program. In our tool, JDoodle, it was compiling, then executing our file, right? The same way as I did with this command. You executing a program, so you're basically just interpreting that program, then translating it into an executable, into a language that is understood by computers, and then you execute that, right? So I have to update that executable file of mine before I execute. So I have to compile. Then if I do this, now you see that our program is working the way it's supposed to work, and you will see we added 3 lines. Those are the 3 lines. So that's your for loop, and this is your while loop. You're counting from 500 to 600. That makes sense, right? Cool. So now let's come to this other variant of a loop, of this while loop. So what this one does is that is the same loop as while loop, just that this one, it always runs at least once. So in terms of the minimum of times this loop can run, regardless of the condition, it first runs once, right? So it's a do while loop. Cool. So it's do, and then you have this block, right? And then what you have there is print. We just want to print. So in this case, we just want to print from say 1 to 10, but then we don't have a variable, right? So let's start, say int w is equals to 1, right? We want to count from 1. Let's just have a bit of space, and let's not forget to add our lines, end line, end line, end line, right? Cool. And then we have our printf, right? And then what we're going to do there is we have to have a format specifier, right? This is d end line, right? Then we're gonna print w, right? And then we're gonna have our period for our statement. Then we want to increment y, right? So this you already know, this is just the statements inside the while loop, but what's new is this. So what this is saying is that do this, but then where do we fit in the while? Because this is a do while loop. It's still a while loop, but a do while version of it, right? So at the end of the block, you're gonna have while, and then you provide the condition. Let's put a space there. Cool. And then what you want is w is less or equals to 10, right? Because we just want to count from 1 to 10. And that's what we have, right? Escape, right? And our file is 348 bytes. And then if we come there, let's clear these, and then we type ls, and then we're gonna have that. So there we go. So after that, while we have our space there, and then we have our count from 1 to 10, right? That's our do while loop. I don't know if you guys did understand all that, but I do believe you did. And do practice, and practice makes perfect, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to explain the exercise that I want you guys to do. I think it's very much better if you guys do the exercise and not me do the exercise, because it makes it, or it gives you an opportunity to see if you're truly learning and if you're truly understanding the concepts, right? So let's just quickly discuss this exercise, then we quickly end this tutorial. So here's an exercise, right? You're going to create a simple calculator with the following features. I mean, you want to add two numbers, divide two numbers, and then you want to subtract two numbers and multiply two numbers. So how do you get to solve this problem? The first thing you want to ask yourself is, what do I need? So the first thing you need is you need the two numbers before you even add them, right? So you get the user input to provide the two numbers. Then what you want to do is you want to provide the operation that you want to do, instead of you just doing addition then manually go into your code and do subtraction. No, you want to do that based on the input. If I say I want to add, it gives me sum. If I want to multiply, it gives me the product, right? So that's what you want to do. Get two inputs which are of integers, and then you get the operation. Either use a character data type or a string data type as we introduced. You can do the string data type just to practice the new type. And yeah, that is basically the exercise. And thank you for watching. If you do like the video, do leave a like, and if you're new and you haven't subscribed, do subscribe. And yeah, basically, if you found this material or this content or this video useful, then yeah, do subscribe so that you can not miss new lessons like this, which are happening every Tuesday at 10 or at 12 a.m. I meant. But yeah, that's it for me, guys, and I shall see you guys in the next tutorial.